Happy New Year! It's fitting that for Fiction Friday today, we're starting a new chapter called A Miracle of Two in our ongoing book, Lad, a Dog, by Albert Payson Terhune. I wonder what this miracle will be. I can't wait to find out. As always, the link to the ebook is in the description below. Chapter 3, A Miracle of Two. The connecting points between the inner and outer lad were a pair of the wisest and darkest and most sorrowful eyes in all dogdom. Eyes that gave the lie to folk who say no dog has a soul. There are such dogs once in a human generation. Lad had but one tyrant in all the world. That was his dainty golden white collie mate, Lady. Lady, whose affections he had won in fair life and death battle with a younger and stronger dog. Lady, who bullied him unmercifully and teased him and did fearful things to his stately dignity, and to whom he allowed liberties that would have brought any other aggressor painfully near to death. Lady was high-strung and capricious, a collie de luxe. Lad and she were as oddly contrasted a couple, in body and mind, as one could find in a day's journey through their North Jersey hinterland. To the place, at intervals far too few between to suit Lad, came human guests, people, for the most part, who did not understand dogs, and who either drew away in causeless fear from them or else insisted on patting or hauling them about. Lad detested guests. He met their advances with cold courtesy, and as soon as possible got himself out of their way. He knew the law far too well to snap or growl at a guest, but the law did not compel him to stay within patting distance of one. The careless caress of a mistress or the master, especially of the mistress, was a delight to him. He would sport like an overgrown puppy with either of these deities, throwing dignity to the four winds, but to them alone did he unbend, to them and to his adored tyrant Lady. To the place of a cold spring morning came a guest, or two guests. Lad at first was not certain which. The visible guest was a woman, and in her arms she carried a long bundle that might have been anything at all. Long as was the bundle, it was ridiculously light, or rather pathetically light, for its folds contained a child, 5 years old, a child that ought to have weighed more than 40 pounds and weighed barely 20. A child with a wizened little old face, and with a skeleton body which was powerless from the waist down. 6 months earlier, the baby had been as vigorously and jolly as a collie pup, until an invisible something prowled through the land, laying its fingertips on thousands of such jolly and vigorous youngsters, as frost's fingers are laid on autumn flowers, and with the same hideous effect. This particular baby had not died of the plague, as had so many of her fellows. At least her brain and upper half of her body had not died. Her mother had been counseled to try mountain air for the hopeless little invalid. She had written to her distant relative, the mistress, asking leave to spend a month at the place. Lad viewed the arrival of the adult guest with no interest and with less pleasure. He stood aloof at one side of the veranda as the newcomer alighted from the car. But when the master took the long bundle from her arms and carried it up the steps, Lad waxed curious. Not only because the master handled his burden so carefully, but because the collie's uncanny scent power told him all at once that it was a human. Lad had never seen a human carried in this manner. It did not make sense to him, and he stepped hesitantly forward to investigate. The master laid the bundle tenderly on the veranda hammock swing and loosed the blanket folds that swathed it. Lad came over to him and looked down at the pitiful little face. There had been no baby at the place for many a year. Lad had seldom seen one at such close quarters, but now the sight did something queer to his heart, the big heart that ever went out to the weak and defenseless, the heart that made a playfully snapping puppy or a cranky little lapdog as safe from his terrible jaws as was Lady herself. He sniffed in friendly fashion at the child's pathetically upturned face, into the dull baby eyes. At sight of him came a look of pleased interest, the first that had crossed their blankness for many a long day. Two feeble little hands reached out and buried themselves lovingly in the mass of soft ruff that circled Lad's neck. The dog quivered all over, from nose to brush, with joy at the touch. He laid his great head down beside the drawn cheek and positively reveled in the pain the tugging fingers were inflicting on his sensitive coat. In one instant, Lad had widened his narrow and hard-established circle of loved ones to include this half-dead wisp of humanity. The child's mother came up the steps in the master's wake. At sight of the huge dog, she halted in quick alarm. "Look out," she shrilled. "He may attack her. Oh, do drive him away." "Who, Lad?" queried the mistress. "Why, Lad wouldn't harm a hair of her head if his life depended on it. See, he adores her already. I never knew him to take to a stranger before, and she looks brighter and happier, too, than she has looked in months. Don't make her cry by sending him away from her." "But," insisted the terrible woman, "dogs are full of germs. I've read so. He might give her some terrible—" "Lad is just as clean and germless as I am," declared the mistress with some warmth. "There isn't a day he doesn't swim in the lake, and there isn't a day I don't brush him. He's a collie, though," protested the guest, looking on in uneasy distaste, while Baby secured a tighter and more painful grip on the delighted dog's ruff. "And I've always heard collies are awfully treacherous. Don't you find them so?" "If we did," put in the master, who had heard that same asinine question until it sickened him, "if we found collies were treacherous, we wouldn't keep them. A collie is either the best dog or the worst dog on earth. Lad is the best. We don't keep the other kind. I'll call him away, though, if it bothers you to have him so close to Baby. Come, Lad." Reluctantly, the dog turned to obey the law, glancing back as he went at the adorable new idol he had acquired, then crossing obediently to where the master stood. The baby's face puckered unhappily. Her pipe-stem arms went out toward the collie. In a tired little voice, she called after him, "Dog, doggy, come back here right away. I love you, dog." Lad, vibrating with eagerness, glanced up at the master for leave to answer the call. The master, in turn, looked inquiringly at his nervous guest. Lad translated the look, and instantly he felt an unreasoning hate for the fussy woman. The guest walked over to her weakly gesticulating daughter and explained, "Dogs aren't nice pets for sick little girls, dear. They're rough, and besides, they bite. I'll find Dolly for you as soon as I unpack." "I don't want Dolly," fretted the child. "Want the dog. He isn't rough. He won't bite. Doggy, I love you. Come here." Lad looked up longingly at the master, his plumed tail a-wag, his ears up, his eyes dancing. One hand of the master stirred toward the hammock in a motion so imperceptible that none but a sharply watchful dog could have observed it. Lad waited for no second bidding. Quietly, unobtrusively, he crossed behind the guest and stood beside his idol. The baby fairly squealed with rapture and drew his silken head down to her face. "Oh, well," surrendered the guest sulkily. "If she won't be happy any other way, let him go to her. I suppose it's safe, if you people say so. And it's the first thing she's been interested in since—" "No, darling," she broke off sternly. "You shall not kiss him. I draw the line at that. Here, let Mama rub your lips with her handkerchief." "Dogs aren't made to be kissed," said the master, sharing. However, Lad's disgust at the lip-scrubbing process. "But she'll come to less harm from kissing the head of a clean dog than from kissing the mouths of most humans. I'm glad she likes Lad, and I'm still gladder that he likes her. It's almost the first time he ever went to an outsider of his own accord." That was how Lad's idolatry began, and that, too, was how a miserably sick child found a new interest in life. "Aw, Lad would never hurt the little girl. He loves everyone, just like I do. And I especially love children. They're pinecone-sized. Be sure to come back on Monday for our next Music Monday song, and Wednesday for the start of a new wiki series for January. And on Friday, we'll continue our chapter and find out what happens to the little girl and Lad. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Bye!